Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today? How are
I
you?
can. My internet connection's a little shaky, but hopefully better than last time we tried this. So,
Well, when we start, please you telling us a little bit about you. Tell us your name and then tell us a little bit about you so we can get to know you a little bit.
my name is Erin Biggerstaff. I currently work at the law school at Duke in recruiting and employee relations, but I'm originally from Texas and I've kind of lived all over. I went to college in Wisconsin. I lived in New York City for a while. Kind of fell into the legal recruiting world backwards. I actually have an arts and nonprofit background. So yeah, kind of a strange path to where I'm at now in North Carolina.
Do you like North Carolina?
I do, yeah. It doesn't feel like home, if that makes sense. Even though I really like Durham and I like my neighborhood and my community. It doesn't, sometimes you just go places and they feel like home, and sometimes they just don't quite. So I don't know if I'll be here, or I probably will not be here forever. But I do like it. That's not to say anything negative about North Carolina. It actually kind of reminds me of where I grew up in East Texas, like all the pine trees and the red dirt. I think maybe that's actually part of it. Like I'm a little I'm a little scarred. Not that I have, nothing against East Texas in particular or the pine trees there, but
I'm a hugger too. I love hugging.
Childhood connections. So
So thank you for agreeing to do this chat with me today. So we are going to talk about a couple of things. I want to get your thoughts about this. What do you think when you hear the phrase Black Lives Matter?
I think it's absolutely true and overdue, and it's sad that we are at the point that not only do we have to say it, but that people still don't hear it.
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's so, you can't really talk about that right now in this month and, year that we're in without talking about the other side, which is the White Lives Matter folk. And the fact that that's the thing is it's just really sad to me.
Yeah.
It's really sad to me.
My analogy of the white lives versus Black lives or any other kind of lives is like you call for the fire department because the house is on fire. The fire department shows on the street and they start putting water on all the houses that are not on fire, and the house that is on fire burns to the ground. I don't think it's anyone saying that no other lives matter. I don't think any of us think that, and I don't think that's our philosophy. I think what we're trying to say is that we have not had justice since we were brought here to America. So, to kill someone simply because of the color of their skin or the amount of power you have is it's defeating. It's overwhelming. It's those things that displace you in ways that make no sense at all.
Yeah, our society has been set up and has acted, and our culture has acted in ways that has been saying Black lives don't matter, which is the reason that now we need to say out loud and really push Black Lives Matter, and that people still don't see that. It makes me think. I always would, this has happened so often throughout our history, and it's great that there's been more light shown on these more egregious incidences of violence in recent years. Not that there's never, they've always been happening, but it always reminds me of goes back to Nina Simone and Mississippi Goddamn, why don't you see it?
Absolutely.
It's all, why don't you see it? I don't know. Like how can people, especially like I said, I grew up in East Texas, and in Durham, it's different. Like for the, there's definitely people on that side of the White Lives Matter oh, don't tread on my rights, that's not like refusing to see the institutional racism, but in many places in Texas, including the town I grew up in, they don't see it, and they don't want to see it, and they're so resistant to it. Once again, not everybody, but a larger group of people. It comes from that, like, that defensiveness, of like, oh, don't tread on my rights. But it's not about you. You're not the one being oppressed. And there is the overlapping of, many of these people, are in lower economics, status. And so in many ways, they are also being oppressed by our economic systems, but it's a different level. Like there's, yes, that's a form of violence. It's a form of violence that, Black people in America have to deal with as well, in a large part. But to have that, and then also have people acting violently against you, whether it's actual like physical violence or emotional violence or economic violence, it's just a whole other level. And to say that you don't see that or it's not real is so invalidating, and that's a violence of its own.
Right.
And the way I see it.
And I think that a part of that has to be that, to go all the way back to 1619, maybe even go back to when the Pilgrims landed in America on the Mayflower. I mean, every time they encountered something that was different than them, they destroyed it, right? So, the Native Americans, the indigenous people, they were pushed off to the side. Their land and their way of life and everything was destroyed. Then you have 1619 when you're bringing these enslaved people to America to do free labor, and for people to get rich off of that labor and then see no harm in it. So what I hear a lot of is, well, I didn't have any slaves. I don't even understand how that's another, like, one of those statements people say, they have Black friends. What the hell does that mean? You didn't have any slaves. Your family prospered because of slavery? Did your family actually get up out of the dirt that you were in with enslaved people? And if you answer that question yes, then it doesn't make any difference whether you had slaves or not. You are participating in a society that enslaved labor made possible.
Yeah, and we're still benefiting from it, whether or not we come from families that had slaves. It doesn't matter if you're perceiving or passing or are white. You are, in our culture right now, still benefiting from that system.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of hard to break that mold. We have Thanksgiving the fourth Thursday in November. And why is that? Things become traditions and parts of your lives, and this is the way we've always done things. One of the most famous things in IT is this is the way we've always done it, right? So what exactly does that mean? Does that mean we're not open to change, or does that mean that, the way we did it before worked and we don't need to change it? Now, I don't know what the answer to either one of those questions are, but I think that what's really important is that we recognize that here we are in 2020, and the people who are sworn to protect and serve are killing us for small infractions, if anything. A Black man running through a construction site becomes a victim. It's something about that is just not right, and it doesn't make sense to me. But then other people have justified it and said, well, he looks sketchy. Trayvon Martin looks sketchy. This is a kid, and he's walking home, and somebody kills him. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So my next question.
It's also, to add to that, like, it's also, people seem to forget, it's not the job of police to be a, jury, a trial, and judge. Like, even if somebody is doing something absolutely wrong against the law, even dangerous, physical violence should be the absolute last resort. And there's it seems, I'm certainly no expert on this, but it seems like there's a very active culture within American police departments of like us versus them. And, it's not actually about protecting the people. It's about, this machismo and having this like militarization of the police departments. It's really problematic.
Absolutely. So I learned this last year from some of the students in the Balsa class, that what we know today as the police started out as the slave patrols, right? So they were hunting down slaves and bringing them back, putting bounties out, going all over the country to find out if the slave had escaped. So if that's your legacy, that you are a remnant of slavery, there's no way you can possibly see another person as human, because there's no way what happened in slavery could have happened. It's just no way that mothers had their children stripped away from them. There's no way that white men raped black women. There's no way that black men were lynched in an astonishing number. There's just no way you could leave that behind and come here in 20 and not have figments of that still in your activities, right? So if you look at law enforcement as a whole, most of the police officers are white, most of the judges are white, most of the prosecutors are white. So it's a system set up to make sure that, I don't even know what the right word is, but to maintain some kind of control that's similar to what slavery was, right? Can I control your behavior? So So my next question is this: when you hear the word diversity, what comes to mind?
Well, I mean, I mostly right now look at it when I hear the word diversity, I think about it in the legal recruiting context, because that's what I do every day at work, or even like kind of, the business context of, people of needing diversity in the workplace and in professions. I mean, beyond that, there's also like diversity of, neighborhoods. I live in Cleveland Holloway in Durham, which is technically East End, but it's an issue in my neighborhood because it's a more historically Black neighborhood, and now it's being heavily gentrified. And there's still, plenty of, there's a diversity of, economic, people in different economic brackets and, from different places. And especially like my street is actually super diverse. Like there's a Hispanic population, there's Black people, there's white people, but it's a real mix. But even my street kind of has like a bit of a like reputation in the neighborhood of like, oh, I don't know, let's go over, like people talk a lot in Durham about wanting to keep these neighborhoods in Durham diverse, but then at the same time they're like, oh well, that that building's like not, that lawn isn't mowed, or like, and it's all of this like kind of like icky, like what do you really want? Do you want only what, like affluent Black doctors to move into our neighborhood and everybody else can go away? Like, is that what you really want? Or do you actually want a vibrant neighborhood with different people who have different cultures and different lifestyles? Like, my street, people play loud music all the time and party outside, and I kind of like that. Like, that's, to me, that's like people enjoying their lives and living and culture. But a lot of my neighbors don't like that because they want to live in a, comfy suburb where everybody acts exactly like them. And that's, once again, this is not an issue that I have expertise on, but that's definitely an issue, I think, in Durham generally, of like this weird dichotomy of like embracing diversity and embracing the rich Black history of Durham, but then also simultaneously kind of like wanting to like clean it up or sweep it under the rug or only keep it in its little box. And I think that has some correlations to how diversity is viewed in the workplace too, of like, oh well, we want people from different backgrounds, different races, different cultures, but we want them to act a certain way. Like, we still want them to look like us and act like us, we just want to be able to like click them off on a box and say, oh, we have so many people who are, you know, international or minority or, you know, but we don't actually want to accommodate. And I'm not trying to like, you know, this isn't specifically a legal recruiting thing. I do think that law firms are making strides and really trying. They have a long way to go. But in recent years, they really are trying. So I'm not trying to like throw anybody specifically under the bus and speaking very broadly. But I've seen that, you know, that I think that's an issue. That's something I've heard from students for sure. You know, the fact that we're still having to talk about and, you know, validating, you know, how you can wear your hair to go to a job interview. You know, like it's good we're talking about it because it's still a problem, but it shouldn't be a problem. You know, why you shouldn't have to try to fit into a box that's not you and that's not your culture and isn't. You know, if you're gonna thrive, have a diverse workforce that's gonna thrive and be happy, and you're gonna retain them, they need to feel like they can be themselves in their job and in their workplace and with their coworkers. And that's, you know, that's very broad. That goes definitely beyond on race. That's
so the point you made just a few minutes ago about, you know, how you have to have your hair done. So I think we're at 9 states now have embraced the Crown Act, which means that Black people can wear dreads, or, you know, if you can't go to a hairdresser, you can just braid your hair so you could just look halfway presentable. But there's that. But I think to your point earlier, you know, when you were talking about gentrification in your neighborhood and in neighborhoods in Durham, I think one of the underlying foundations of asset owning real estate is that is supposedly the key to wealth. So if I can push you out of home ownership, right? So first we had redlining and, you know, all these things, we were building all these projects for Black people and all this stuff right here, but there was not something they owned. And then you had white flight, right? So when a Black person moved in the neighborhood, everybody white had to move out because that supposedly makes your value of your home go down. You know, so when neighborhoods start taking back possessions from Black people, like, so, you know, they'll come into a Black family and offer them $50,000 for their home, right? For a lot of families, that's a lot of money, right? So I've got $50,000, you know, so I'm going to sell my home without walking all the way down the plank to where you fall off, right? So what does it mean when this $50,000 is gone? Because where can you go and buy another house for $50,000? Yeah. Nowhere, right? So I don't, nowhere in the world can you go buy a house right now for well, maybe someplace, I don't know, I don't know, but for the most part, it's not realistic that you can go buy a house for $50,000. So now you've given up your property, and you are now back into this box that you got to figure out where to live, right? So, you know, being in Durham, I'm sure you saw the news about McDougal Terrace, right? But their carbon monoxide problems. So communities of color struggle with environmental injustice, health injustice, race injustice, pay injustice. And I mean, you could just keep on going and going and going and going.
Like the highway, all the Hayti neighborhood, you know, it happened in Austin too, where in the 50s and 60s, they wanted to put highways in. So where did they put the highways in? They put them in the poor Black communities and just raised them and got rid of the culture. Yes, probably gave them some sort of pittance, but not enough to replace what they had before. Like, I mean, it's just violent stealing of wealth and community. Yeah.
When you have a system like that, and you don't have any, you know, somebody to do the checks and balances, is this fair? You know, and for a lot of Black people, and I don't know what the percentage of Black people are, they live so close to the poverty line that, you know, the one little thing I get means I have something that I can do something with. And understanding wealth and understanding what wealth is has not been something that we have had taught to us, you know, right? So, you know, when you go to school, you know, you learn a lot of things. Well, you're supposed to learn a lot of things, but one of the things that may not be educated on is how to manage your assets, right? So, you know, whether you have stocks or whether you own a house or whatever it is, and all of that is dumped in the laps of people of color, and they're struggling to find their way, you know, and I think that, you know, while I think Black Lives Matter, I think all lives matter. I think what really needs to happen is Black people need to be given an opportunity to be on the same footing, right? So we don't want your power. We don't want to take your job. We don't want to take your house. We don't want to take your car. We just want our own house, our own car, our own things at the same way you get it, right? So if you come to a job and they pay you X amount of dollars, why can't they pay me X amount of dollars, right? So where's the break in the continuum of the American dream, right? So it's just kind of gone. Okay, so
yeah, and on top of that too, I mean, you get $50,000 if you're for, this doesn't just happen in that instance, but a lot of communities of color, and this goes back to redlining, live in places that it's even there's additional things that you might not be at first blush realize are disadvantaging them economically and otherwise, like wealth wise. So like in Milwaukee, I lived in Milwaukee for a year, and it's a heavily segregated city because it goes back to the redlining, and there are communities that it's, you know, we call them, you know, food deserts. Like you live in a community, maybe you do own your house, but you don't have the same access to everything. Like you have to spend an hour and a half on the bus to get to your job. You know, if you want fresh groceries, like, yeah, maybe there's the corner store where you can get, you know, chips and basic things. But if you want, you know, vegetables, like that's another, you know, 40 minutes on the bus to get to the grocery store. And, you know, those are huge issues that just continue to keep people back, you know. And so how can we change that and like support all of our people, and, you know, think about like urban planning, community planning as well, to kind of reverse those issues, those inequalities that came from redlining and are continuing to be built upon again with gentrification and people getting pushed out again.
Absolutely. Okay, we have about 4 minutes, so I'm gonna ask you my last question. Did you watch the video of Mr. Floyd's death?
I did not watch the full thing. I even just see the screenshot, you know, that one photo that was on, you know, every social media post of the police officer with his knee on the neck and hand, like that, like I saw it and it's just like this visceral, like, and the thing is, like, we've seen it so many times before. You don't have to actually even watch the full video to already know, like, you just know immediately what's happening. It's not the first time it's happened. It's continued to happen. I watched a little bit of it. I watched a little bit of a longer clip, and I think I got a minute in, and I just, at some point I will watch it all the way, because I do think it's important to like shine a light on problems and look at them, you know, look at truths in the face and not, you know, push them away. The only reason that I haven't is just because I already know what it is. I've already seen it, even if I haven't seen it. And I think so many people feel that way too. But I do think it's important to shine a light on truths and to look at these things. Yeah, it kind of goes back to in therapy for a while, and a big part of that is like looking at your values and looking at your truths and like not pushing things down. And I think us as a nation need to do that. We need to really take a long, hard look at our values, and how we're acting and how the systems that we put in place match up or don't match up with those, and then take a real good look at the truths of our nation and the truths of what's going on. It's hard when you're talking about as a nation, because we're pretty divided as a nation right now. But I think that's an important step for all of us, even you know, ones that think they already see it, like me, you know, continue to look at it and continue to like fully feel that and see the truths of what's going on. And I hope that that's not what we need to keep everybody motivated to make change. I'd like to think that people could look at what already is happening on a less violent scale and look and make appropriate changes to make everybody's life more prosperous without having to have these egregious acts to, push us along.
I mean, as a Black woman, and I think I could say this for a lot of Black people, we see this so often, right? So Mr. Floyd was killed on May 25th, and 3 weeks later, a man in Atlanta is shot because he's asleep in his car at a fast food restaurant. The logic of that is so out of touch with everything that you know and you think. And for me, you talked about it being visceral. For me, it was heartbreaking. It was so wretching. It was just to the point where this man is laying on the ground. He's handcuffed. Somebody's got his knee on his neck, his hand in his pockets, and this man says, "I cannot breathe. Breathe, please, please, please." I can't breathe, and that does not warrant a response from anybody that's in that space. Not the other officers that are standing there. One of the officers said to the police with his knee on the neck, "Hey, do you think maybe we should put him in the car?" And he says, "No, he's staying right here." They talk about premeditated murder. That has to be, because somebody asked you,
Yeah.
This is killing him, do something, and you don't do anything. So, I think that there's so much about what we as Black people see and have to ingest every day, like every single day. Working at Duke Law, being a student at Duke Law, Black or brown student, it's not the same. So many of the Boston students that I've talked to have said, coming into Duke and predominantly white institutions, people are always questioning how you got here. Like, what did you do to get here, right? Or how you could be summarily dismissed from your job 10 months after you have an audit and get a 10-minute phone call to say, "Hey, we're letting you go." That's real Black life. That's what we experience all the time, right? First in, first out. Lowest paid. You got all of these criteria that fall in line, and people stand tall in that. People feel comfortable that they're doing the right things. When you were talking earlier about companies hiring diverse populations, I only refer you back to Google, right? So Google 2015 facial recognition software, you know about that, right? Mm-hmm. So Google introduced their facial recognition software, the first phase of it, in 2015, and every time it would come up with a skin tone that was anywhere, you might have gotten a shade or two off of white, but anything else, it put up a picture of a gorilla. Because the people who are developing this software all look exactly alike. So they don't have a concept of a Black face, right? Because they're not a Black face, right? So to get people to understand why diversity matters, I don't think Google did that on purpose. I don't think it was their intention. I don't think that they intended. But the problem is, if all you have is white people in leadership roles, white people with all the power, you're going to have incidences like this more and more. And with emerging technologies, what's already happening to Black and brown people is going to get worse.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but there's a trend in legal recruiting towards these like AI systems where like basically you do like these like cognitive tests and different things. It's real kind of opaque how it works, but they're like, "Oh, well, we base this off of," it's actually that they claim that it helps with diversity because they base it off of the performance of their existing like people in their law firm or organization who they think are successful. It's like, yeah, but those are all a certain sort of people right now. Right. So so if you're basing it off of that, it's by, and it may not have anything on the surface that has to do that you think with race or culture or, anything else, but we could talk about neurodiversity too, like that's a thing, but like, I just don't, how can that be if it's based off of what I think that's very related, like based off of what you already are seeing as working, but you're trying to change that, you can't base your new product off of the old thing. Like you have to kind of break the mold and open it up and be like, okay, what are we actually missing? Not what's working. That's good. It's good to know what's working and what you have, but what else can we add in that could also be working that is different?
Absolutely. And I think that your point is so salient, because like all of these emerging technologies have bias built into them, because the people who are developing them are introducing. So application tracking system, like say for example at Duke, if you put your application in for a job, you apply for a job, and let's just say you wanted to be an engineer, it's going to start, the job description says it's all these things here, here's what I'm looking for. And so how do you put that in a resume exactly worded the way they have it in a job description, right? So for Black and brown people, we are telling our truth. We're not making up stuff. We're not saying we can do this or whatever it is. We're telling our truth, and our truth ends up being heard against us. So, right. So where did you go to college? You know, did you go to North Carolina Central or did you go to Yale? You know, what job did you have? Did you work from IBM or did you work for McDonald's? You know, so these kinds of things that are inherently biased against Black and brown population. And I would even say women also.
Even like GPA, like if you go back to like think about, so I went to 2 very different schools in Texas. The first where I grew up was a very diverse community. And then I ended up college in a very, 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 very white high school. And I kept, you know, I was in touch with all my friends at the old, you know, my old high school. And the education that I got at that second high school, because it was so white, so wealthy, and they could, you know, pass bonds and you know, get the best teachers and do all of this. Like I had such better preparation for some of the really important things like the AP tests. Like, you know, in my English class, we were doing the like 40-minute timed writings like every other day. Right. And then one of my best friends who is equally as smart as I am and probably smarter than I am when it comes to like verbal skills, she wasn't doing that. And so like, and then our, you know, test scores are different. Right. Because of preparation, like, and that's very tied into, you know, the structural racism in America because of how the school system works. And so it's like from the beginning, you have all of these disadvantages. That's a thing I think law firms are starting to realize too, that they need to think about how they're really identifying candidates that are going to be successful at their organization. And, you know, GPA and, you know, your summer job and your, you know, college you went to, those are some factors, but like they need to look beyond that if they want to look beyond, you know, get beyond, you know, the structural racism of it. Like you need to start identifying other factors of success and what those could look like on a resume.
Absolutely.
And it's that's hard to do even as a, you know, human looking at a resume. It's much harder to build that into an AI system that's reviewing resumes.
Absolutely. And I think that to some degree, you do see a little bit of change in that. So a lot of universities are moving away from SAT scores and ACT scores as criteria for admittance, you know, so people are moving away from that. And so with that, they're also taking the scholarship away too, right? So I'm not going to judge you coming into the school based on what grades you have, what your GPA was, how well you did on the ACT or SAT scores. But now I'm going to limit the amount of money you have until you have gotten to some level, right? So some students get full scholarships out the gate, you know, and then there are these other students who may get it almost like, you know, walk onto a basketball or football team, right? They may get to be a great football player or a great basketball player or something like that. But in reality, they've got to prove it first. So although we let you in, you've got to prove it first, you know, so.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of work to be done. And I hope you young people get your act together and get it done, because we old people are tired of fighting this battle. So you youngins got to get to it. You know, y'all got to get to it and make the changes that are necessary for our survival and for the changes that we need in our world. Thank you so much, Erin, for talking to me. It's been wonderful. You know, we should have been talking about this a long time ago.
That's true. That's true.
Yes, but I am glad that we were able to do this. Thank you. And as soon as the video converts, I'll send you a link and you can look at it and let me know if I can upload it or not. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Stay safe and stay in touch.
Same to you. And please keep in touch with me.
I will.
Right, bye.
Bye.